Hey guys, tonight we are stepping through a heavy, brass-studded wooden gate and into a world where the air smells like crushed roses and the cooling earth. We are visiting a Mughal garden party in the mid-17th century, a place where nature is forced to be perfectly symmetrical and the humans are forced to be even more perfect than the trees. You probably believe that a garden party is a place to kick off your shoes, grab a cold drink, and tell a loud joke. But in the imperial court, the way you stand near a fountain is more important than anything you might actually have to say. Before you get too comfortable and possibly fall asleep halfway through, tap like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this odd mix of boredom and history. It keeps the channel alive, and the stories just sleepy enough to help you drift off again next time. I would love to see where you are listening from tonight. If you have a moment, drop your city and the local time in the comments. It is always so peaceful to imagine people all over the world settling down at the same time to hear about the distant past. Now, dim the lights, let the world outside grow quiet, and turn on a fan if you like that soft, steady hum in the background. Let your shoulders loosen and your breathing slow. This is your time to drift. No rush, no deadlines, no noise. Just you, a little warmth in the air, and the faint whisper of history waiting to unfold. So, settle in, and let's ease gently into tonight's journey together. The sun has finally dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky a deep, bruised purple that feels heavy and soft like silk. You are standing outside the massive red sandstone walls of the palace gardens, and the heat of the Indian day is still radiating off the stones, warming your back. However, as the heavy gates creak open, a sudden draft of cool, moist air rushes out to meet you. It is as if the garden itself is breathing. You step over the high stone threshold, being careful not to trip over your own heavy robes, and you enter the Charbagh. This is the classic four-part garden layout, a square divided into 4 equal quadrants by long, narrow water channels. Historians often note that these gardens were designed to be a physical representation of paradise on earth, with the 4 rivers of life flowing toward the center. It is a very tidy way to organize nature, though you suspect the gardeners probably have a very difficult time telling the weeds to grow in straight lines. You walk slowly down the central path, which is made of white marble that seems to glow in the fading light. The symmetry is almost dizzying. To your left, there is a row of dark, pointed cypress trees that look like silent soldiers standing guard. To your right, there is an identical row of cypress trees, mirroring the first set perfectly. If you lean even slightly to one side, you feel like you might ruin the entire balance of the empire. The Mughals loved this sense of order. It was their way of saying that they had conquered not just the land, but the very chaos of the wild world. You notice that every fruit tree is pruned to the exact same height, and every flower bed is a perfect geometric shape. It is the kind of place where a single fallen leaf looks like a personal insult to the emperor. As you move deeper into the garden, the sound of the city outside begins to fade. The honking of distant carts and the shouting of vendors are replaced by the rhythmic, steady pulse of water. You hear the water bubbling in the narrow channels, a sound so soft it is almost like a whisper. This is the shadavan, the sloped water chute. The stones in these chutes are carved with little zig-zag patterns so that the water ripples and dances as it slides down, creating a shimmering effect and a gentle, splashing music. It is a very clever way to make a small amount of water sound like a rushing river. You find yourself matching your footsteps to the rhythm of the splashes. You move slowly, not because you are tired, though the humidity is certainly doing its best to melt your resolve, but because moving quickly in a Mughal garden is considered very poor taste. Only servants and people who are late for their own executions run in a place like this. The air here is thick with the scent of night, blooming jasmine. It is a heavy, sweet smell that seems to coat the back of your throat. You might notice that all the flowers around you are white. This is not a coincidence. This part of the garden is what people call a mahtab bagh, or a moonlight garden. The designers specifically chose white flowers, jasmine lilies, and white roses, because they reflect the light of the moon and the lanterns, making the garden look like it is glowing from within. It is a very romantic idea, though it also means you can see exactly who is sneaking toward the snack table from a mile away. You see small oil lamps, carved from pale stone, nestled among the flower beds. Their flames are steady and low, casting long, flickering shadows across the marble walkways. You reach the center of the garden, where the 4 water channels meet at a large, square pool. In the middle of the pool sits a raised platform made of polished stone. This is where the elite guests are beginning to gather. You see people moving like colorful ghosts through the shadows. They are draped in layers of fine muslin and silk, decorated with threads of real gold that catch the light of the lanterns. You feel the weight of your own outfit. It is beautiful, certainly, but you start to wonder if the Mughal definition of paradise included sweating through 3 layers of embroidered tunics. Historians still argue whether these elaborate garden parties were actually enjoyable for the guests, or if they were just high-stakes endurance tests for the nobility. You suspect it was a bit of both. You have to keep your back straight, your head level, and your expression one of calm, detached elegance, even if a mosquito is currently considering making a meal out of your earlobe. There is a specific way you must approach the central platform. You cannot simply walk up and hop onto it. You must wait for the person of higher rank to acknowledge you with a slight tilt of the head. You watch a nobleman ahead of you. He performs a taslim, a deep bow, where he places the back of his right hand on the ground and then slowly brings it up to his forehead. He does this 3 times. It is a very slow, graceful movement that makes your own lower back ache just watching it. You realize that in this garden, every movement is a dance. Every gesture is a word. You are not just at a party, you are inside a living machine of social status. The way the water flows from the high ground to the low ground is exactly how the power flows in this garden, from the emperor down to the lowest guest. You find a spot near the edge of the water where the mist from a small fountain cools your face. The fountain is not a tall, spraying jet like you might see in a modern park. Instead, it is a low, bubbling marble lotus flower. The water spills over the edges of the petals and into the basin below. It is subtle and quiet. You look down into the water and see small silver fish darting between the shadows of floating rose petals. Everything here has been considered. Even the fish have a job to do, which is to look pretty and not make too much noise. You realize that the silence of the garden is not a natural silence, it is a manufactured one. Thousands of servants are working behind the walls to make sure the water stays clean, the lamps stay lit, and the grass stays trimmed. Yet you do not see a single one of them. They are like the ghosts of the garden, making sure your nature experience is perfectly curated. The light is changing now. The deep purple of the sky has turned to a velvety black, and the stars are starting to poke through the haze of the city heat. The moon is rising, a silver sliver that makes the marble paths look like rivers of light. You take a deep breath, and for a moment, the stress of the social rules fades away. The cool air, the smell of the jasmine, and the steady sound of the water start to work their magic. Your heart rate slows down. Your shoulders, which were tight with the effort of looking dignified, finally begin to relax. You are in a place designed to be the most beautiful spot on earth. And as long as you don't trip or spill your drink on a duke, you might actually survive the night. You look toward the far end of the garden, where a pavilion stands. It is an open, air structure with thin, elegant pillars and a roof that looks like a row of white tents frozen in stone. This is where the music is coming from. It is a faint, high-pitched sound of a sitar, the notes rolling through the air like the water in the channels. The music doesn't have a fast beat. It just drifts, rising and falling without any hurry. It feels like the sound of time passing slowly. You realize that in the 17th century, no one was in a hurry. There were no clocks ticking on the walls, no phones buzzing in pockets. There was only the sun, the moon, and the slow growth of the trees. It is a very different kind of boredom than the one we know today. It is a heavy, luxurious boredom that allows you to notice the way the light reflects off a single drop of water on a leaf. As you prepare to move toward the pavilion, you notice a group of scholars standing by a pomegranate tree. They are whispering about the architecture of the garden. One of them mentions that the number of terraces in this garden, 8 in total, is meant to represent the 8 levels of heaven described in certain texts. Another scholar disagrees, suggesting that the number was simply chosen because it fit the slope of the hill. This is the kind of debate that can last for hours at a Mughal party. You decide to steer clear of them. You aren't here for a lecture on geometry. You are here to experience the peculiar rules of the night. You adjust your sleeves, take one last look at the perfectly still water in the central pool, and begin the long, slow walk toward the heart of the festivities. Every step you take is intentional. Every breath you take is filled with the scent of the night. You are part of the garden now, a temporary ornament in a landscape that was built to last forever. The grass beneath the marble edges is trimmed so low it feels like a carpet. You notice that in some areas, the grass has been replaced by clover or tiny, creeping herbs that release a fresh, peppery scent when your hem brushes against them. It is a sensory overload, but a very quiet one. It is as if the garden is trying to tell you a secret in a language made of smells and shadows. You pass a small bridge made of a single slab of stone. Underneath it, the water channel narrows, causing the water to speed up and make a slightly higher, chirping sound. It is a tiny detail, but you realize that even the sound of the water changes as you move through different rooms of the garden. You are now approaching the inner circle. The social pressure is rising. You see the higher, ranking officials sitting on bolsters of velvet and silk. They aren't sitting like you might sit on a couch. They are perched with a kind of regal stiffness that looks both comfortable and terrifyingly formal. You realize that even the way you sit is a social statement. If you lean back too far, you look lazy. If you sit too straight, you look nervous. You have to find that middle ground of imperial chill. You take a steadying breath, feeling the cool air fill your lungs, and you prepare to enter the next phase of the evening. The garden is no longer just a backdrop, it is the stage, and you are one of the actors. The play is about to begin, and the only script is the tradition of 1,000 years. The flickering light of a nearby torch catches the gold embroidery on your cuff, and for a second, it looks like a spark of fire. You look up at the trees, their leaves silhouetted against the stars, and you feel very small. This garden was built to be eternal, to outlast the people who built it and the people who walk in it tonight. It is a comforting thought in a way. All the social anxiety, the worries about rank, and the fear of making a mistake are just tiny ripples in a very large, very old pool. You let out a long, slow sigh, and as you do, you feel your eyelids grow just a little bit heavier. The night is young, but the garden is already doing its work, lulling the world into a state of beautiful, symmetrical sleep. As you move away from the edge of the fountain, you become acutely aware of the sheer physical weight of your own existence. To be a guest at a Mughal garden party is to be a walking display of the empire's textile industry, and tonight, you are carrying several pounds of that industry on your shoulders. You look down at your sleeves and notice how the moonlight catches the intricate Zardosi embroidery. This isn't just thread, it is literal gold and silver wire hammered thin and stitched into the fabric in the shape of tiny, repeating flowers. You feel the stiffness of the metal against your wrists, a constant, heavy reminder that you are a person of consequence. If you were a simple merchant, your sleeves might be plain cotton, but here, your arms are encased in a metallic garden that mimics the one you are walking through. It is a bit like wearing a very expensive, very beautiful suit of armor made entirely of jewelry. You might find it slightly ironic that in this heat, the highest social status is achieved by wearing as many layers as humanly possible. But the Mughals were never ones to let a little thing like the climate get in the way of a good outfit. Your primary garment is the jama, a long-sleeved tunic that flares out from the waist like a bell. It is made of the finest Dhaka muslin, a fabric so legendary for its lightness that it has names like Abi-i-Rawan, or running water, and Shabnam, which means evening dew. There is a mainstream historical fact that underscores the absurdity of this luxury. The Emperor Akbar specifically decreed that his court garments should be tied on the right side for his Muslim courtiers, while Hindu officials tied theirs on the left, a small sartorial choice that allowed everyone to know exactly who they were dealing with at a single glance. You find yourself checking your own ties, feeling the silk ribbons beneath your arm. The muslin is so thin and translucent that you are actually wearing several layers of it just to maintain your modesty. It is a strange paradox. You are wearing more clothes than you have ever worn in your life. Yet the fabric is so delicate that you feel almost naked when the breeze catches it. Underneath the jama, your pajama, the ancestor of the modern pajama. are gathered in tight, elegant folds around your ankles. They are made of a heavier silk, perhaps a deep indigo or a rich crimson, which provides a visual anchor for the airy muslin above. You feel the silk sliding against your skin with every step, a cool, fluid sensation that is one of the few things keeping you from overheating. You realize that your entire outfit is designed to move. When you walk, the flared skirt of the jama ripples, and the silk of the trousers shimmers. You aren't just a person walking through a garden. You are a kinetic sculpture. You are expected to move with a certain rhythmic grace, ensuring that your clothes drape and flow in a way that suggests you have never had to hurry for anything in your entire life. If you move too fast, the muslin might bunch up or the gold threads might snag. And in this court, a snagged thread is practically a social catastrophe. Around your waist is the patka, the ornamental sash that is perhaps the most important part of your ensemble. It is a long piece of silk, heavily embroidered at the ends, which hangs down to your knees. It isn't just there to keep your tunic in place. It is a platform for your personal style. Historians still argue whether the patka was originally designed as a functional piece to provide back support for long hours of standing at court, or if it was always intended to be a purely decorative status symbol. You feel the weight of it pressing against your lower back, and you are inclined to think it is a bit of both. Tucked into the folds of the patka is a small, ivory-handled dagger, its sheath encrusted with tiny emeralds. You have no intention of using it, of course. It is as much a part of your jewelry as your necklace. It is a sharp, glittering reminder that while this is a party, it is a party for a warrior elite who take their accessories very seriously. Then, there is the matter of your head. You are wearing a pagri, or turban, which is an engineering feat in itself. It is made from about 20 feet of fine silk, wound with such precision that not a single strand is out of place. It feels like a warm, heavy crown. Tucked into the front of the turban is a sarpek, a jeweled ornament featuring a large, central spinel and a spray of heron feathers. The feathers tremble slightly as you walk, catching the light like silver needles. You have to keep your neck very straight and your chin slightly tilted upward to prevent the whole construction from shifting. It is a great way to ensure you maintain a regal posture, though after 3 hours, you might start to feel like your head is being used as a pedestal for a very heavy, very expensive bird. You imagine the relief of taking it off at the end of the night. But for now, you must carry your status with a steady neck. The jewelry is where the sensory experience becomes truly overwhelming. Around your neck are several strands of Basra pearls, each one perfectly round and shimmering with a soft, milky light. There is a quirky tidbit often whispered in the bazaars, that the wealthiest nobles would have their pearls ground into a fine powder to be mixed with their cooling drinks, believing it would soothe the heart and purify the blood. You aren't sure if you want to drink your jewelry, but you certainly enjoy the way the cool stones feel against your chest. You are also wearing armbands, or bazibans, set with rubies using the Kundan technique, where the stones are held in place by pure, soft gold foil rather than claws. This makes the jewelry look like it is part of your body, as if the rubies are simply glowing spots of light on your skin. Every time you move your arms, you hear the faint, musical clink of gold against gold, a sound that says, "I am rich." in a very polite, rhythmic way. Your feet, however, are currently enjoying a rare moment of freedom. Before stepping onto the marble platform of the pavilion, you had to slip off your juttis, the leather shoes with the curled-up toes and the intricate silver thread. Now, your bare soles are pressing against the cool, smooth surface of the white marble. The stone has been sitting in the shade all day, and it feels like ice against your skin, a delicious contrast to the warm, humid air. You notice that the other guests are also barefoot, their feet looking pale and vulnerable against the dark shadows of the garden. There is something very intimate about being barefoot with the most powerful people in the empire. It strips away a layer of the formal armor, even as you are weighed down by gold and silk. You find yourself wiggling your toes slightly, enjoying the sensation of the marble's texture, which is so polished it feels almost like silk itself. The scent of your clothing is another layer of this elaborate social game. Your robes haven't just been washed. They have been infused with the smoke of burning agarwood and sandalwood. As you move, the heat of your body releases the fragrance, creating a personal cloud of scent that follows you wherever you go. It is a deep, woody smell that mingles with the jasmine of the garden. You might notice that your host smells slightly different, perhaps a more expensive blend involving musk or ambergris. In this world, how you smell is a direct indicator of how much you can afford to spend on rare resins from the distant mountains of the east. You find yourself breathing in deeply, the rich, smoky aroma acting as a sort of aromatic anchor, keeping you grounded in the midst of all the visual splendor. It is a very sleepy, heavy scent, one that makes the world feel old and slow. You observe a young nobleman nearby who is clearly struggling with his layers. His turban is slightly askew, and he keeps tugging at his patka as if it is an unruly pet. You feel a brief flash of sympathy for him. It takes years to master the art of looking comfortable while dressed as a treasure chest. You, on the other hand, have embraced the weight. You let the gold thread pull at your sleeves, and you allow the pearls to settle into the hollow of your throat. You realize that the trick is not to fight the clothes, but to become part of them. You aren't wearing the outfit, you are the soul of the outfit. This is the imperial chill you were aiming for. The ability to look like you were born in 20 feet of silk, and that you find the weight of several hundred carats of emeralds to be a perfectly normal burden for a Tuesday night. The colors around you are a riot of muted tones in the moonlight. Because it is a night party, most people have opted for pale yellows, creamy whites, and soft silvers which catch the flickering lamp light. However, some of the more daring guests are wearing deep night sky, blues and pomegranate, reds that look almost black until they move. You watch the way a woman's dupatta, a long scarf, floats behind her like a ghost as she crosses a bridge. The fabric is so light it seems to defy gravity, lingering in the air for a second after she has passed. It is a beautiful, ghostly effect. You realize that the Mughals weren't just designers of gardens. They were designers of light and movement. They knew exactly how a certain type of silk would look under the moon, and they knew how a certain type of gold thread would shimmer when reflected in a pool of water. As you stand there, you think about the people who made these clothes. You think about the weavers in Bengal who spent their lives in damp rooms, to keep the thread from snapping, spinning muslin so fine it was nicknamed woven air. You think about the embroiderers who spent months hunched over a single sash, their eyes straining in the dim light to catch the gleam of the silver wire. Your outfit is the result of thousands of hours of human labor, a physical manifestation of the power that can command such skill. It makes you feel a bit more humble, even as it makes you look more important. The clothes are a bridge between the earthy reality of the empire and the heavenly aspirations of the court. They are a way of saying that even though we are made of flesh and bone, we can wrap ourselves in the beauty of the stars and the flowers. You find yourself leaning against a marble pillar, the cold stone seeping through the layers of your jama. The contrast is lovely. The warmth of your body, the weight of the silk, and the chill of the stone all come together to create a sensory cocoon. You feel incredibly sleepy, but it is a pleasant, heavy kind of sleepiness. The world is soft, the light is dim, and the rules of the garden are as clear and rigid as the patterns in the marble. You don't have to worry about the future, because in this garden, the future is just more of the past. The trees will grow, the water will flow, and the silk will always be thin enough to pass through a ring. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the soft rustle of your own sleeves as you breathe. The gold wire on your cuff catches on a small, rough patch on the pillar, and you carefully unhook it. It is a reminder to stay present, to stay elegant. You can't drift off just yet. There are still people to meet, tea to drink, and poems to hear. But as you open your eyes and look out over the moonlit garden, you feel a sense of profound peace. You are perfectly dressed for a perfect evening, and for now, that is enough. The social pressure that felt so heavy when you first entered the gates has transformed into a kind of rhythmic comfort. You know exactly who you are because your clothes tell you so. You know exactly where you belong because the marble under your feet is yours to walk upon. You take a slow, deliberate step forward, the silk of your jama whispering against your legs, and you continue your journey through the night, a golden ghost in a garden of white flowers. You notice that even the way people stand is dictated by their clothing. To avoid wrinkling the heavy embroidery, men stand with their legs slightly apart and their hands resting on their sashes. It is a pose of readiness and relaxation all at once. You mimic it, feeling the balance of your body shift. The weight of the jewelry actually helps lower your center of gravity, making you feel more stable, more rooted to the earth. It is a strange thought that being covered in wealth could make you feel more like a tree. But here, in this symmetrical paradise, everything is connected. The gold in your clothes comes from the same earth as the stones in the wall and the roots of the cypress trees. You are all part of the same grand design, a tapestry of life and luxury that stretches back for generations. A faint breeze stirs the air, carrying the scent of the water and the distant smell of wood smoke from the palace kitchens. Your muslin sleeves flutter, the gold thread making a sound like dry leaves skittering across a floor. It is a lonely, beautiful sound. You realize that despite all the people around you, the experience of the garden is a deeply personal one. No one else can feel the specific weight of your pearls or the way the marble feels against your heels. You are in a crowd, but you are also in a private world of your own making. The peculiar rules of the garden are just a framework that allows you to exist in this state of heightened awareness. You aren't just attending a party. You are experiencing the very limit of what it means to be refined, to be cultured, to be a Mughal. And as the night deepens, you find that you wouldn't trade this heavy, gold-encrusted exhaustion for all the modern comfort in the world. You leave the solid support of the marble pillar and begin to move across the central platform, your bare feet finding a rhythm on the smooth, cool stone. There is a specific art to walking in a Mughal garden, a kind of slow motion glide that makes you look as though you are floating just above the ground. You cannot simply stomp from one place to another. You must remember that the white marble beneath you is not just a floor. It is a mirror for the moon and a canvas for the shadows of the cypress trees. Each step you take must be silent. You feel the slight texture of the stone, a faint grain that provides just enough grip to keep you from sliding, which is a good thing because a person of your rank slipping on a wet patch of marble would be the talk of the court for the next 3 years. You find yourself focusing on the sensation of your heels and toes pressing into the coolness, a grounding feeling that contrasts with the light, airy sensation of your muslin robes fluttering around your legs. The layout of the walkways is strictly geometric, following the straight lines of the water channels that divide the garden into its 4 signature quadrants. This is the heart of the Charbagh design, a concept that the first Mughal emperor, Babur, brought with him from the cool, mountainous regions of Central Asia. There is a mainstream historical fact that Babur was so distressed by the dusty, flat plains of India that he spent much of his time designing these gardens as a way to recreate the terraced, water-filled landscapes of his youth. You can almost feel his influence here. The paths are raised slightly above the level of the flower beds, giving you a sense of being elevated, looking down upon the nature that has been so carefully tamed. It is a very orderly way to experience the world. You aren't just walking, you are navigating a map of the emperor's mind, where everything has its place and nothing is left to chance. As you walk along the edge of the main water channel, you notice how the water is perfectly level with the stone. It looks like a long, dark ribbon of silk stretched across the garden. You have to be careful here. The transition between the white marble path and the dark water is so subtle in the moonlight that it would be very easy to take a confident step and end up knee-deep in a decorative stream. You imagine yourself standing there, your gold-encrusted sleeves dripping with garden water, trying to look like you intended to go for a midnight swim. It is a funny thought, but the reality of the social shame keeps your eyes focused on the edge. You realize that the water channels aren't just for cooling the air. They are social boundaries. They dictate where you can go and how you must get there. You cannot simply cut across the grass to talk to a friend. You must follow the path, make the 90-degree turn, and approach with the proper amount of ceremony. The water in these channels is constantly moving, though you wouldn't know it just by looking. If you peer closely at a floating rose petal, you can see it drifting slowly toward the next terrace. This movement is part of a complex irrigation system that relies on gravity and hidden clay pipes. Historians still argue whether the specific layout of these channels was designed primarily for spiritual symbolism, representing the rivers of honey, milk, water, and wine, or if it was a purely practical solution for managing the intense heat of the Indian summer. As you feel the cool mist rising from the surface, you are inclined to think the engineers were mostly worried about keeping the guests from fainting. The water acts like a natural air conditioner, pulling the heat out of the air and replacing it with a soft, moist breeze. It is a luxury that few people in the 17th century could even imagine, let alone experience. You come to a shadavan, one of those sloped water chutes you heard from a distance earlier. Up close, it is a marvel of stonework. The marble is carved with a honeycomb, or fish, scale, pattern, and as the water pours over it, it breaks into 1,000 tiny ripples that catch the light of the lanterns. The sound here is louder, a steady, rhythmic splashing that masks the sound of your own breathing. You stop for a moment to watch the water dance. It is mesmerizing, a constant flow of liquid light that never stays the same for a single second. You notice that the stone around the chute is damp and covered in a very thin layer of moss, which smells earthy and green. It is a reminder that even in this perfectly controlled environment, nature is always trying to find a way back in. You decide to stay a safe distance from the edge, remembering the weight of your silk jama and the difficulty of drying out gold thread. There is a quirky tidbit about these water systems that most people don't realize. The water was often chilled or scented before it even entered the garden. Deep underground, in stone, lined tunnels called canets, the water was kept away from the sun. Sometimes the palace staff would even use saltpeter in separate, nearby pipes to further cool the drinking water that flowed to the pavilions. You can feel the result of this labor as you move. The air near the water is 10 degrees cooler than the air near the walls. It creates a microclimate of comfort that feels like a physical embrace. You find yourself walking slower and slower, unwilling to leave the cool zone of the channel. The imperial chill you are aiming for is much easier to maintain when the environment is doing half the work for you. You encounter another guest on the path, a man who looks significantly older and more important than you. This is where the navigation becomes a high-stakes social game. The path is narrow, barely wide enough for 2 people to pass without their sleeves brushing. According to the rules of the garden, the person of lower rank must yield the dry center of the path to the person of higher rank. You instinctively move toward the very edge of the water, keeping your back straight and your eyes lowered in a respectful salam. You feel the cool air from the channel on your left side as he passes, his heavy robes making a soft, shushing sound against the marble. He doesn't look at you, but he acknowledges your presence with a slight, almost imperceptible slow down of his pace. It is a tiny victory of etiquette. You have navigated the encounter without falling in or offending a superior, which feels like a significant accomplishment for one evening. Your journey continues toward the lower terraces. The garden is built on a gentle slope, and each level offers a different perspective on the palace and the stars. As you descend the marble steps, you notice that each step is very shallow and very wide. This is not by accident. It is designed to force you to take slow, dignified strides. You can't run down these stairs. You would look like a frantic goat. Instead, you must plant each foot firmly, letting your robes settle before taking the next step. It gives you a lot of time to think about the sheer amount of work that went into leveling this ground. Thousands of workers spent years moving earth and stone to create these perfect terraces. You feel a sudden sense of gratitude for the stability of the ground beneath you. It is a man-made mountain, built so that you could have a nice place to walk in the moonlight. The light is different on the lower terrace. The lanterns are fewer, and the moon is doing most of the work. The shadows of the fruit trees, mango, orange, and pomegranate, stretch across the paths like long, dark fingers. You notice that the fruit is hanging low, heavy with juice and the heat of the day. There is a rule about the fruit in an imperial garden. You can admire it, you can smell it, but you absolutely cannot pick it. Only the royal family and their invited harvesters are allowed to touch the produce of the paradise. You find yourself tempted by a particularly large pomegranate that is glowing like a ruby in the moonlight, but you keep your hands folded in your sash. You don't want to be the person caught stealing a piece of fruit from the emperor. It is much better to just enjoy the scent, which is a mix of sweet citrus and damp earth. As you move, you notice how the garden is designed to play with your sense of distance. The long, straight paths and the repeating rows of trees make the garden look much larger than it actually is. It is a visual trick called enfilade, where each opening aligns with the next, creating a never-ending corridor of nature. You look back toward the main pavilion, and it looks miles away, a tiny glowing box in the distance. Then you look toward the far wall, and it feels like you could reach it in a few steps. It is a bit disorienting, like walking through a dream where the geography keeps shifting. You find yourself relying on the sound of the water to keep your bearings. The sound of the central fountain is a deep, low thrum, while the smaller chutes have a higher, chirping tone. By listening to the water, you can tell exactly where you are in the quadrant. The texture of the air changes as you pass under a cluster of weeping willow trees. The branches hang down like a curtain, brushing against the top of your turban. The air here is still and heavy with moisture. You can feel the dew starting to form on the leaves, and every now and then a single cold drop of water falls and lands on your shoulder. It is a startling, refreshing sensation. You pause for a moment, letting the silence of the willows wash over you. There are no other guests in this little corner of the garden. For a brief second, you are completely alone. The social rules, the rank, the clothing, it all feels very far away. You are just a human being in a dark, wet garden, listening to the world breathe. It is a moment of profound peace, the kind that only comes in the middle of a very long, very quiet night. But you cannot stay in the shadows forever. You are here to be seen. After all, you step back out onto the main path, the white marble glowing once again. You notice that the path is inlaid with black stone in a pattern that looks like a scrolling vine. You hadn't noticed this before. It is so subtle that you only see it when the moon hits it at a certain angle. You realize that there are layers of detail in this garden that you could spend a lifetime exploring. Every stone has been chosen for its color and texture. Every tree has been placed to create a specific shadow. It is an overwhelming amount of intentionality. It makes you feel very small, but also very safe. In a world that can often be chaotic and unpredictable, this garden is a promise that order and beauty are possible. You start to head back toward the center of the garden, where the main party is. The walk back up the terraces is slightly more effort, and you feel the muscles in your legs beginning to tire. The weight of your gold-embroidered jama and the layers of muslin is starting to take its toll. You find yourself taking even slower steps, using the imperial glide as a way to conserve your energy. You watch the other guests, noticing how they all seem to have developed a similar, rhythmic way of moving. It is like a slow, silent parade. No one is shouting, no one is laughing loudly. The garden demands a certain level of decorum, and everyone is happy to oblige. The peace of the place is contagious. As you reach the upper terrace, you see a small bridge made of a single, massive piece of red sandstone. It crosses over the main water channel, connecting the north and south quadrants. You step onto it, feeling the change in texture. The sandstone is rougher than the marble, warmer to the touch. You stop in the middle of the bridge and look down into the water. The reflection of the moon is broken by the ripples from a nearby fountain, creating a shimmering, silver mess on the surface. You think about the crocodile dung sunscreen you heard about once, a ridiculous rumor about ancient beauty secrets. And you realize that even in a place this perfect, people have always been obsessed with the strange and the beautiful. You smile to yourself, a small, private moment of humor in the middle of all this formality. The sound of a distant gong signals that the next phase of the evening is about to begin. It is a low, vibrating sound that seems to hum in your very bones. You take a final look at the water channel, watching the way the light dances on the fish, scale carvings of the chute. You feel a sense of mastery over the terrain. You have walked the paths, navigated the social encounters, and avoided the watery traps of the Charbagh. You are ready to rejoin the elite under the glowing lanterns of the pavilion. Your bare feet are cool, your heart is steady, and your mind is as clear as the water flowing beneath the bridge. The garden has tested your grace, and you have passed. You step off the bridge and back onto the marble, your movement as fluid as the stream. You notice that the scent of the night, blooming jasmine, is even stronger now, a sweet, heavy perfume that seems to pull you forward. You follow the scent, letting it guide you back to the heart of the garden. The peculiar rules of navigation no longer feel like a burden. They feel like a dance you have finally learned the steps to. You are part of the symmetry now. You are a point of light moving along a white line, a tiny, essential part of the grand design. As you approach the lights of the pavilion, you feel a wave of sleepiness wash over you, but it is a good sleepiness. It is the exhaustion of a person who has spent a night in paradise and is finally starting to feel at home there. The last few steps toward the pavilion are the easiest. You move with a confidence that comes from knowing exactly where your feet will land. You don't need to look down anymore. You can feel the marble, you can hear the water, and you can sense the presence of the other guests through the rustle of their silk robes. You have become a creature of the garden, a ghost of the Mughal court moving through a world of white stone and dark water. You reach the edge of the pavilion and pause, taking one last breath of the cool, moist air before stepping back into the warmth of the lanterns and the social heat of the party. The journey through the walkways is over, but the memory of the cool stone and the rhythmic water will stay with you long after the sun comes up. You transition from the cool marble walkways of the terrace to the carpeted floor of the main pavilion, and the change in texture under your feet is immediate and soothing. The hard, chilled stone is replaced by the thick, plush pile of a Persian rug, woven with intricate patterns of hunting scenes and floral borders. The air here is warmer, trapped under the canopy, and it carries a new, intoxicating weight. The scent of the night, blooming jasmine from the garden, is now competing with the rich, heavy aromas of the imperial kitchen. Warm saffron, toasted cumin, and the sweet, woody smoke of slow-cooked meats. You are moving toward the dastakwan, the long, ceremonial floor cloth that serves as the table for this evening's feast. In the Mughal world, the dastakwan is not just a piece of fabric. It is a sacred space of hospitality and social order. You notice that it is made of fine white calico, spread over the rugs to protect them, and it is already laid out with an array of gold and silver bowls that catch the flickering light of the surrounding torches. Before you can even think about the food, you must undergo the most important ritual of the evening, the washing of the hands. In a world without forks or spoons, your hands are your primary tools, and they must be perfectly clean. A young servant approaches you, moving with a silent, practiced grace. He carries a silver aftaba, a tall, elegant ewer with a long, curved spout, and a matching chalamchi, a wide basin with a perforated lid. You hold your hands over the basin, and he begins to pour a thin stream of warm water over your fingers. The water has been infused with rose petals and lemon peel, and as it splashes against your skin, it feels like a soft, liquid velvet. You don't use soap in the modern sense. The citrus and the floral oils do the work of cleansing while leaving your skin smelling like a summer garden. You find the sound of the water hitting the silver basin to be incredibly meditative, a high-pitched, metallic melody that echoes softly under the pavilion roof. You dry your hands on a soft, quilted towel offered by another servant, feeling the warmth linger in your fingertips. Now comes the part where your social training is truly put to the test, the art of sitting down. You cannot simply flop onto the floor. You must lower yourself into a kneeling or cross-legged position on the silk bolsters, making sure that your heavy jama and your layers of muslin don't bunch up in an undignified way. You settle onto a cushion of pale green velvet, feeling the softness support your weight. You are sitting in a circle of high-ranking guests, and you are acutely aware that every movement you make is being observed. There is a mainstream historical fact that the seating arrangement at a Mughal feast was a perfect map of the political landscape, with the most favored courtiers sitting closest to the host or the emperor's empty representative chair. You are positioned somewhere in the middle, which is a relief. It means you aren't the star of the show, but you aren't a nobody either. You can afford to be a little bit sleepy, as long as you maintain your posture. The rules of the meal are simple, but unforgiving. You must use only your right hand. To the Mughals, the left hand is reserved for personal hygiene and is considered spiritually and physically unclean for dining. Even if you are a natural lefty, tonight you are a right-handed aristocrat. This presents a bit of a challenge when dealing with a large, fluffy piece of nain or a bone in lamb kebab. You have to learn the three-finger technique, using only your thumb, index, and middle fingers to pinch, tear, and scoop. Your ring finger and pinky are expected to stay out of the way, curled slightly into your palm. It is a very delicate, almost bird-like way of eating. You might find it slightly ridiculous to be so careful about your pinky when there is a mountain of delicious rice in front of you. But in this court, eating with your whole hand would make you look like a hungry bear in a silk suit. You practice the motion in the air for a second, feeling like a very refined, very hungry puppet. The first dish placed before you is a biryani so fragrant it almost makes your eyes water. The rice is not just white. It has been stained with saffron to a deep, royal yellow, and it is studded with dark raisins, silvered almonds, and pieces of meat so tender they seem to be holding themselves together by sheer willpower. You reach out with your 3 fingers and take a small pinch. The rice is warm and oily, the individual grains long and separate. There is a quirky tidbit often mentioned by travelers of this era. The royal chefs would sometimes gild the individual grains of rice with edible silver or gold leaf to impress the guests. You look closely at your portion and see tiny, shimmering flakes that catch the torchlight. You are literally eating treasure. It feels heavy on your tongue, a rich, metallic sweetness that mingles with the spice of the saffron. You realize that this is not a meal designed for nutrition, it is a meal designed for awe. As you eat, you notice the silence of the feast. Unlike a modern dinner party where the goal is constant conversation, a Mughal meal is often a quiet affair. People speak in low whispers, if at all, out of respect for the food and the host. The only sounds are the soft clink of silver against porcelain, the rustle of silk sleeves, and the distant, rhythmic music of the sitar from the other side of the garden. It is a very peaceful way to dine. You find yourself focusing entirely on the textures and the flavors. You take a piece of naan, which is warm and slightly charred from the tandoor oven, and use it to scoop up a bit of slow-cooked halim. The stew is a thick, creamy blend of wheat, barley, and meat that has been cooked for hours until it is a singular, savory velvet. It is the ultimate comfort food, the kind of dish that makes your bones feel heavy and your eyelids feel even heavier. Historians still argue whether the complexity of Mughal spice blends was a way to display wealth or a practical necessity for preserving meat in the intense Indian heat. As you taste the layers of cardamom, cinnamon, clove, and black pepper, you suspect it was also a form of sensory art. Each bite is a different story. One moment you are tasting the coolness of mint and yogurt, and the next, the slow, creeping heat of a green chili. You have to be careful not to let any sauce drip onto your beautiful white muslin sleeves. If you were wearing that crocodile dung sunscreen from the earlier stories, you might not care about a few stains, but here, a single drop of gravy is a mark of shame. You move with agonizing slowness, bringing each morsel to your mouth with the precision of a jeweler setting a diamond. You are starting to realize that the peculiar rules of eating are actually a form of meditation. They force you to be present, to be mindful, and to be very, very careful. A servant moves around the circle, offering a bowl of cooling sherbet made from rosewater and crushed ice. You take a sip from a small, jade cup, and the cold liquid shocks your system in the best way possible. It cuts through the richness of the meat and the oil, resetting your palate for the next course. You look around at your fellow diners. They all look like they are in a trance, their faces illuminated by the soft, golden light of the lamps. No one is rushing. No one is reaching across the cloth. There is plenty for everyone, and the abundance of the empire is on full display. You see a dish of kebabs being brought out, the meat still sizzling on silver skewers. They are shami kebabs, made of finely minced meat and lentils, so soft that they dissolve the moment they touch your tongue. You wonder how many people it took to prepare this single meal. Hundreds of hands in the kitchens, thousands of miles of trade routes to bring the spices, all of it converging here on this white cloth for a few hours of moonlit indulgence. There is a light joke to be made about the sheer volume of food. You feel like your patka, that ornamental sash around your waist, is getting tighter by the minute. You are wearing several layers of silk and gold, and your stomach is starting to protest against the confinement. You have to find a way to breathe deeply, without popping a seam. You adjust your posture, leaning back slightly against the bolster, and try to look like a person who is elegantly satisfied rather than a person who is about to burst. You notice an older nobleman across from you who has clearly mastered this. He manages to eat with incredible efficiency, while looking completely detached, as if the food is simply appearing in his mouth by magic. You try to mimic his expression of calm indifference, though your taste buds are currently throwing a party of their own. You are now offered a dish of muzaffar, a sweet, saffron-flavored rice pudding topped with a thick layer of vark, the edible silver foil. It is incredibly sweet, the kind of sweetness that makes your teeth tingle. But it is also cooling and light. The texture is grainy and creamy at the same time. You use your fingers to take a small amount, being careful not to let the silver leaf stick to your lips. There is something very strange about the feeling of metal melting on your tongue. It doesn't really have a taste, but it has a feeling of luxury that is impossible to ignore. You think about the fringe tidbit you heard once, that some doctors in the court believed that eating silver could cool the brain and help with insomnia. Given how sleepy you are feeling right now, you are starting to believe they might have been right. The combination of the heavy meal, the warm air and the silver-topped pudding is a powerful sedative. As the meal winds down, the servants return with the afterba and chalamchi for a second round of hand washing. This time, the water is even warmer and scented with sandalwood. You wash away the oils and the spices, feeling the skin on your hands become soft and fragrant once more. The ritual of the meal is closing, and the transition back to the social world of the garden is beginning. You feel a profound sense of satisfaction. You have navigated the three-finger rule. You have avoided staining your robes, and you have experienced the pinnacle of 17th century culinary art. You feel like a part of the history, a participant in a tradition that has remained unchanged for generations. The food wasn't just fuel, it was a performance, and you played your part perfectly. You notice that the conversation is starting to pick up again, but it remains low and musical. People are talking about the quality of the saffron or the tenderness of the lamb, using the same technical language they might use to discuss a poem or a painting. To the Mughals, a well-cooked dish is a work of art, no different from a well-designed garden or a beautifully written book. You find yourself nodding along, even though you don't really know the difference between Kashmiri and Persian saffron. You just know that it tasted like sunlight and earth, and that you are currently very, very happy to be sitting on this green velvet cushion. The peculiar rules don't feel like rules anymore. They feel like the natural way for things to be. Why would anyone ever want to eat with a fork when they could feel the warmth of the rice and the texture of the bread with their own skin? The final touch of the meal is the presentation of pain. A servant brings around a silver tray holding small, triangular packets made of betel leaf. Inside is a mixture of areca nut, lime paste, and various sweet spices like cardamom and anise. You take one and tuck it into the side of your mouth. It is an acquired taste, astringent, spicy, and slightly numbing. As you chew, your mouth fills with a cooling, peppery juice that acts as a digestive and a breath freshener. It is the traditional way to end a feast, a signal that the time for eating is over and the time for intellectual pursuit has begun. You feel a slight buzz from the betel leaf, a gentle sharpening of your senses that cuts through the post-meal fog. You are ready for the poetry and the debates that are to follow, even if your body still wants to sink into the bolsters and never get up. You look out from the pavilion into the garden. The lanterns are still burning, but the moon has climbed higher in the sky, turning the world into a landscape of silver and ink. The water channels are still whispering, their steady pulse a background hum to the quiet voices of the guests. You feel a sense of belonging that you didn't have at the beginning of the night. You have shared food, you have followed the protocols, and you have respected the space. You are no longer just a guest, you are a part of the social fabric of the court. You take a slow, deep breath, feeling the scent of the sandalwood on your hands and the warmth of the meal in your chest. The night is halfway through, and the best is yet to come. As you prepare to move again, you take one last look at the dastark one. The gold and silver bowls are being cleared away with practiced efficiency, leaving the white cloth clean and empty once more. It is a reminder of the transience of beauty. The meal was a masterpiece, but now it is gone, leaving only the memory of its flavors and the lingering scent of its spices. You stand up slowly, being careful to maintain your balance as the blood returns to your legs. Your feet find the cool marble once more, and you feel a surge of energy. The imperial chill has returned, but it is now tempered by a sense of deep, physical well-being. You are ready to face the perfume politics and the poetry battles of the late night hours, armed with the confidence of a person who knows exactly how to eat like a king without ever losing their grace. The way the light hits the floor now makes the shadows look like pools of deep water. You walk carefully, avoiding the dark patches as if they were actual holes in the ground. You are headed toward the scented areas of the garden, where the perfumes of the guests and the flowers will create a whole new set of rules to follow. But for now, you just enjoy the feeling of the night air on your face. The humidity has dropped slightly, and a cool breeze is moving through the pavilion, ruffling the edges of the carpets and the silk hangings. It is a moment of pure, unadulterated peace. You close your eyes for a second, savoring the lingering taste of the rosewater sherbet and the cardamom. You are in the heart of the Mughal Empire, in the middle of a perfect night, and everything, from the silver on your rice to the pearls around your neck, is exactly as it should be. You notice that even the servants seem more relaxed, now that the main service is over. They move with a bit more fluidity, their own silent rules giving way to a more natural rhythm. One of them catches your eye and gives a very slight, respectful bow. You return it with a tilt of your head, the taslim. You learned earlier now, feeling like a natural extension of your body. You are learning. You are adapting. You are becoming a creature of this moonlit world. And as you step out of the pavilion and back toward the water channels, you feel the weight of the night pulling at you, a gentle, insistent invitation to stay just a little bit longer, to see what other secrets the garden has to reveal. The meal was just the beginning. The real soul of the party is only just starting to wake up. As you step away from the pavilion and back into the open air of the garden, you notice that the temperature has shifted. The heavy, moist heat of the evening is now being stirred by a faint, cooling breeze, but the air feels thicker than before. This is not because of the humidity, but because of the perfume politics that dominate the late night hours of the Mughal court. In this world, your social standing is not just something people see in your silk robes or hear in your polite greetings. It is something they smell before you even arrive. You are now entering the most intimate part of the evening, where the groups of guests are smaller and the proximity to the host is much closer. This means your personal scent must be impeccable. You reach up to your neck, where you applied a thick, oil-based perfume earlier in the evening, and you feel the warmth of your skin activating the fragrance. It is a deep, honeyed scent of distilled roses, and as the heat of your body releases it, you feel as though you are walking inside a private, invisible cloud. The Mughals were obsessed with scent, viewing it as a bridge between the physical world and the spiritual realm. There is a mainstream historical fact that the Empress Nur Jahan, the powerful wife of Emperor Jahangir, is credited with the discovery of the method for making attar of roses. Legend says she was walking in her garden and noticed a thin, oily film floating on the surface of the rose water in the fountains. She had it collected and found that it was the most concentrated, beautiful perfume imaginable. Tonight, you are wearing a variation of that very same oil. Unlike modern perfumes that rely on alcohol, which evaporates quickly and can be quite sharp, your attar is based in sandalwood oil. It is heavy, slow, and lingers on the skin for hours. It doesn't shout, it whispers. You find that the scent is so soothing that it makes your breathing slow down, each inhale bringing a sense of calm that matches the steady rhythm of the water channels. You move toward a group of officials standing near a large silver brazier. White smoke is curling upward from the coals in long, lazy spirals. This is the dup dan, or incense burner, and it is filled with a mixture of agar wood, frankincense, and myrrh. The smoke doesn't rise straight up. It seems too heavy to fly, so it weaves between the guests, clinging to their silk sleeves and the folds of their turbans. You realize that your clothes are acting like sponges for these scents. By the end of the night, you won't just smell like yourself. You will smell like the entire history of the garden. Historians still argue whether these intense fragrances were intended primarily as a form of spiritual protection, creating a clean, sacred space around the body, or if they were simply a high-stakes display of the ability to procure rare ingredients from the furthest corners of the known world. Either way, The effect is hypnotic. The combination of the smoke and the rose oil makes the world feel soft and blurry at the edges. There is a quirky tidbit that you might find amusing if you weren't trying so hard to look dignified. To ensure a constant personal fragrance, some of the most dedicated courtiers use a fahi. This is a tiny ball of cotton wool soaked in expensive perfume and tucked directly into the outer fold of the ear. You see a nobleman nearby with a small white tuft peeking out from his ear, and you have to suppress a smile. It looks a bit like he is trying to stop a leak, but in reality, he is ensuring that every time he turns his head, he is greeted by a fresh wave of jasmine or musk. It is like wearing a pair of aromatic headphones. You decided to skip the ear cotton tonight, preferring to let your scent radiate naturally from your pulse points. But you have to admire the commitment to the craft. If your personal scent radius is too small, you risk being overlooked in the hierarchy of the garden. If the emperor can't smell you from 5 feet away, you might as well be invisible. You are basically a human air freshener at this point, and you notice that as you move closer to the center of the terrace, the quality of the smells changes. On the outer edges, near the walls, you might catch the faint, earthy scent of the damp soil or the smell of the horses in the distant stables. But here, in the inner circle, the air is a curated masterpiece. You find yourself standing near an official who smells strongly of musk. This is the real thing, harvested from the musk deer of the Himalayan mountains. It is an animalic, deep scent that feels like it has a weight of its own. It is so expensive that wearing it is like taping gold coins to your neck and hoping they don't fall off. You notice how people subconsciously lean toward him, drawn in by the rare and powerful fragrance. It is a subtle form of gravity. You adjust your own position, making sure your rose and sandalwood blend is holding its own against the heavier musk. The perfume politics also serve a very practical purpose. In a time before modern sanitation, a large gathering of people in a humid climate could quickly become an assault on the nose. The layers of tar and the constant smoke of the incense burners act as a sensory shield. You are living in a beautiful, fragrant bubble that keeps the less pleasant realities of the world at bay. It is a form of luxury that is purely about comfort. You feel the silk of your sleeves. Call back to the heavy gold thread of section 2, brushing against your arms, and the movement releases another puff of rose scent. You realize that the Mughals designed their clothes to be aromatic delivery systems. The more you move, the more you contribute to the atmosphere of the party. You aren't just a guest, you are a vital part of the garden's climate control. You take a seat on a low marble bench, the stone feeling slightly warmer now that the night has progressed. You are near a patch of night, blooming jasmine, and the natural scent of the flowers is so strong it is almost dizzying. It is a sweet, heady fragrance that seems to signal the peak of the night. You watch the way the white flowers look like tiny stars fallen into the green bushes. There is a light joke among the younger courtiers that if you stay in the jasmine patch too long, you'll fall into a sleep so deep that even the palace gong won't wake you. Looking at the relaxed faces around you, you believe it. The scents are working like a gentle sedative, smoothing over the anxieties of the day and making the social rules feel like a soft, easy rhythm rather than a set of rigid laws. A servant passes by carrying a small, carved jade box, an etar dan. He offers it to a high-ranking lady seated nearby. She uses a tiny silver applicator to dab a drop of ambergris oil onto her wrists. Ambergris is one of the most mysterious ingredients in the world, a substance found floating on the ocean, often described as having a scent that is both briny and sweet. Historians often point out that the trade for these ingredients spanned from the coasts of Africa to the islands of Indonesia. You watch the lady close her eyes as the scent hits her, a look of pure, quiet bliss crossing her face. It is a reminder that in this garden, luxury is not just about what you own, but about how you experience the world through your senses. The scent of the ambergris drifts over to you, a complex, oceanic smell that feels strangely out of place in this landlocked garden, yet perfectly at home in the empire's collection of wonders. You find your own nose starting to feel a bit tired, a phenomenon we might call nose fatigue today. After hours of being surrounded by the most intense fragrances on earth, your senses are beginning to dull. The rose oil on your own neck now just feels like a warm, familiar presence rather than a distinct smell. This is when the incense burners become important again. The sharp, smoky scent of the burning resins acts as a palate cleanser for your nose, cutting through the sweetness of the flowers and the oils. You take a deep breath of the wood smoke, feeling it clear your head. It is a very grounding sensation. It reminds you that despite all the artifice and the gold thread, you are still standing in a garden made of wood, stone, and fire. The social pressure to smell right is constant. If you were to show up smelling of something common, like simple mustard oil or plain tallow, the guards might mistake you for a gardener and hand you a shovel. You have to maintain the imperial chill by smelling like someone who has never done a day of manual labor in their life. You have to smell like someone who spends their time reading poetry and drinking chilled sherbet. You look at your hands, still smelling of the sandalwood water from the post. Meal wash callback to Section 4, and you feel a sense of security. You have passed the sniff test. You are part of the aromatic elite. The peculiar rules of the garden are now etched into your very skin, carried in the oils that have seeped into your pores. As the night deepens, the scents seem to settle closer to the ground. The cooling air keeps the fragrances from rising too high, creating a layer of perfume that hugs the marble paths and the water channels. You feel like you are wading through a sea of flowers. You notice that the conversations have become even quieter, more intimate. People are leaning in closer to one another, not just to hear the whispers, but perhaps to catch a better whiff of a particularly rare blend of etar. It is a very sensory way of bonding. You aren't just sharing ideas, you are sharing an atmosphere. You find yourself nodding along to the rhythm of a distant sitar, the music feeling like it is part of the scent, a series of high, sweet notes that match the lightness of the jasmine. The miasma debate you heard earlier comes back to your mind. You wonder if the physicians of the court truly believed that the scent of roses could stop a fever, or if they just liked the way it made the palace smell. You suspect that beauty and health was seen as the same thing. If something was beautiful and smelled wonderful, it must be good for the soul. In this garden, there is no room for anything ugly or ill-smelling. The world outside the red sandstone walls might be dusty and loud, but here the air is a perfect, filtered version of reality. You let out a long, slow sigh, feeling the tension in your jaw finally release. The scent of the night has done its work. You are no longer worried about your rank or your posture. You are just a part of the fragrant, moonlit air. By the end of the night, your nose is so tired it probably wants to retire to a quiet farm in the country where nothing smells like anything but grass. But for now, you wouldn't change a thing. The complexity of the scents reflects the complexity of the empire itself. Many different elements brought together from far away, blended into a single, harmonious whole. You take one last deep breath of the air near the rose bushes, feeling the tiny molecules of oil settle in your lungs. It is a heavy, floral weight that feels like a promise of sleep. The perfume politics have been navigated, the social standing has been established, and now all that is left is to drift through the final hours of the party, a ghost in a garden of white flowers and silver smoke. You notice a small, terracotta lamp near your feet. The oil inside is also scented, probably with a bit of camphor to keep the insects away. It is a practical touch that doesn't ruin the aesthetic. The light from the lamp is a soft, flickering orange that makes the white marble look like it's glowing from within. You watch the way a moth dances around the flame, its wings casting huge, fluttering shadows on the wall of the terrace. Even the insects here seem to move with a certain grace, drawn in by the light and the scent just like the humans. You feel a strange kinship with the moth. You are both attracted to the beauty and the warmth, navigating the night by following the invisible trails of fragrance that crisscross the garden. The imperial chill is now at its peak. You are perfectly dressed, perfectly fed, and you smell like a dream of the mountains. You lean back against the marble, letting the cool stone of the bench support your spine. You feel the weight of your pearls, call back to Section 2 towers, as they settle against your chest, and you realize that you are completely, utterly relaxed. The garden has succeeded in its mission. It has taken the chaos of the world and turned it into a symmetrical, fragrant paradise. You close your eyes for just a moment, letting the scent of the sandalwood carry you away. You aren't asleep yet, but you are close. The world is a soft, perfumed blur, and the only thing that matters is the steady, rhythmic pulse of the water in the channels, marking the passage of a night that feels like it could last forever. The transition to the next part of the evening, the poetry battles, will require a bit more mental energy, but for now, you just exist in this state of sensory perfection. You are a human rose, a silver thread ghost, a creature of the Mughal night. And as the breeze picks up again, carrying a fresh wave of incense from the pavilion, you feel a surge of quiet joy. You have mastered the peculiar rules of the air, and in doing so, you have found a kind of peace that only a garden like this can provide. You take one more breath, slow and deep, and prepare yourself for the intellectual games that lie ahead, knowing that whatever happens, you will at least smell better than everyone else in the room. The moon has reached its highest point in the sky, turning the entire garden into a monochrome world of silver and deep, velvet black. You are back in the main pavilion, but the atmosphere has changed from the heavy, satisfied air of the feast to something sharper and more focused. The social temperature has risen because the entertainment has shifted from the physical to the intellectual. You are now a participant in the poetry battles, a high-stakes game of wit that determines your reputation, more than your wealth ever could. In this circle, it is not enough to look like an aristocrat. You must think like a philosopher and speak like a musician. You feel the weight of your silk robes. Call back to Section 2 as you adjust your position on the velvet bolster. The imperial chill you worked so hard to maintain is being tested by the mental gymnastics required to keep up with some of the sharpest minds in the empire. You notice that the guests are no longer looking at the food. They are looking at the shammer, the tall, flickering candle that is being moved from person to person. When the candle is placed in front of you, it is your turn to speak. The primary language of this circle is Persian, a language that the Mughal elite adopted as their own, despite their Central Asian roots. There is a mainstream historical fact that for centuries, Persian was the official language of the Mughal court, used for everything from high poetry to the most mundane tax records. Even if your daily life is spent speaking Hindustani or another local dialect, tonight, your tongue must dance through the complex metaphors and rhythmic flows of the Persian masters. You listen as a nobleman across the circle recites a couplet from the poet Sadi. His voice is a low, melodic rumble that seems to vibrate in the still air of the pavilion. He speaks of a rose that withers in the sun, a metaphor for the fleeting nature of power. You find yourself nodding along, the meaning of the words washing over you like the cool water in the garden channels. Call back to Section 1. The beauty of the language is almost as intoxicating as the rositar you are wearing's call back to Section 5. The game is called Bait, Bazi, and its rules are deceptively simple, but incredibly difficult to master while you are this sleepy. When the previous speaker finishes their verse, you must respond with a verse that begins with the very last letter of their final word. It is a linguistic chain that can stretch for hours, testing the limits of your memory and your library of classical literature. You feel a small surge of panic as the candle begins to move toward you. You rack your brain for a verse starting with the letter N. Your mind feels a bit slow, perhaps a result of the heavy saffron rice you enjoyed earlier. Call back to Section 4. But you focus on the flickering flame. You remember a line about the nightingale and the moon, a classic image that is safe but elegant. You wait for the candle to settle, then you speak. Your voice sounds strange to your own ears, soft, measured, and rhythmic. You deliver the couplet with a slight tilt of your head, and you feel the collective release of the audience as they murmur their approval. You have survived your first round. As the candle moves to the next person, you notice the tools of the trade laid out on small, low tables around the circle. There are sheets of vastly special kind of handmade paper, created by layering thin sheets of fiber together until they are as stiff as a card and as smooth as glass. Beside the paper are reed pens or kalam, their tips cut at a precise angle to allow for the thick and thin strokes of the Nastaliq script. The ink is a deep, rich black, made from lampblack, mixed with a touch of gum arabic, and sometimes a hint of musk to make the writing itself fragrant. Historians still argue whether these poetry sessions were truly spontaneous displays of wit, or if many of the guests spent weeks preparing their impromptu verses in advance with the help of professional tutors. You suspect that some of the people around you are definitely reciting something they practiced in front of a mirror. But in this garden, the performance is just as important as the truth. There is a quirky tidbit about these gatherings that reveals the more mischievous side of the Mughal court. Sometimes, the poetry is used to transmit hidden messages or scandalous gossip that no one would dare say aloud in plain prose. By using specific metaphors, comparing a certain flower to a certain official, or using a bird's flight to describe a political shift, the guests can hold entire conversations about court intrigue right under the noses of their rivals. It is a secret code made of beauty. You watch two scholars whispering to each other after a particularly pointed verse about a thieving crow in a peacock's garden, and you realize that a social war is being fought with rhymes and metaphors. It makes you realize that even in this place of peace, the peculiar rules of power are always in play. You have to be careful not to accidentally insult someone by picking the wrong flower for your poem. The poetry battle is not just about competition. It is about a shared cultural vocabulary. You hear references to the legendary poets like Hafiz and Rumi, their words serving as the foundation for the night's discourse. To be a Mughal aristocrat is to be a person who carries a library inside their head. You think about how different this is from the modern world, where information is something we look up on a screen. Here, information is something you have memorized, something that has become part of your very breath. You feel a sense of pride as you recognize a subtle allusion to a 12th century Persian epic. It makes you feel connected to a long line of thinkers and dreamers. You are not just a guest at a party. You are a link in a chain of civilization that stretches back through the mountains of Afghanistan to the high plateaus of Iran. The physical sensation of the mushaira, the poetry gathering, is one of extreme focus and extreme relaxation. Because you are sitting so still, you become hyper-aware of the small sounds around you. You hear the scratch of a reed pen on paper as a scribe records the best verses of the night. You hear the soft, rhythmic clink of a silver spoon against a porcelain cup as someone stirs their tea. You hear the rustle of a heavy silk curtain moving in the night breeze. These sounds provide a texture to the silence, making it feel thick and luxurious. You find your eyelids growing heavy once again. The imperial chill is now a deep, intellectual hum. The world of the garden is fading into the background, leaving only the circle of light around the shama and the musical flow of the Persian verses. You might find it funny to think about how you would explain this to someone from the future. Yes, we sat in a garden for 6 hours and tried to remember poems that started with the letter S while wearing enough gold to buy a small village. It sounds absurd when you put it like that, but here, it feels like the most important thing in the world. The poetry is a way of refining the soul. It is a way of proving that you are more than just a body that needs food and sleep. By engaging in this battle of wit, you are participating in the creation of beauty. You are taking the raw materials of language and turning them into something that will be remembered long after the lanterns have gone out. It is a very sleepy, very beautiful form of immortality. A young woman behind a fine marble screen recites a verse that is so clever it causes a brief moment of stunned silence. Her voice is clear and sharp, carrying through the lattice work with perfect clarity. This is another area where historians still argue. The extent to which the women of the royal household influenced the cultural and political life of the court through these poetry sessions. While they might be physically separated by a screen, their intellectual presence is undeniable. Her verse uses a complex rhyme scheme that leaves the next speaker, a high-ranking general, fumbling for a response. You see him tugging at his patkas, call back to section 2/3, as he tries to find a word that fits. It is a moment of pure social comedy, hidden under a veneer of extreme formality. Even the most powerful warrior can be defeated by a well-placed metaphor. The scent of the night, blooming jasmine eyes, call back to section 1.5, seems to grow stronger as the poetry becomes more intense. It is as if the garden itself is reacting to the beauty of the words. You take another sip of the cooling sherbet, the sugar providing a much-needed spark of energy. You realize that the peculiar rules of the poetry battle are designed to create a sense of harmony. Even when the verses are competitive, they are bound by the same meters and the same traditions. It is a way of resolving conflict through art. Instead of shouting at each other, the courtiers rhyme at each other. It is a much more elegant way to handle a disagreement, though it does require you to be much better at grammar than your average modern politician. As the night moves toward the early morning hours, the poetry becomes more philosophical and less competitive. The verses turn toward themes of the soul, the universe, and the quiet beauty of the night. You hear a poem about the reflection of the moon in a water channel, and you look out toward the actual water channels, call back to section 3, and see the reflection for yourself. The boundary between the art and the reality is starting to dissolve. You feel like you are living inside a poem. The imperial chill has transformed into a state of pure, meditative existence. You aren't just listening to the words, you are feeling them in your chest, a rhythmic pulse that matches the beating of your own heart. There is a fringe tidbit about ghost poets that you find yourself thinking about as you watch a particularly dull-looking nobleman deliver a surprisingly brilliant couplet. It was whispered in the bazaars that some of the less talented members of the court would hire impoverished poets to stand behind a pillar or a screen and whisper lines to them through a hollow tube. You look around, trying to spot any suspicious-looking pillars, but everyone looks perfectly composed. Still, the idea makes you chuckle. The lengths people will go to in order to maintain their social standing in this garden are truly remarkable. Whether he wrote it himself or paid a professional, the verse has the desired effect. The host nods in approval, and the nobleman's reputation is saved for another day. You notice the calligraphy on a nearby table. The Nastaliq script is not just writing. It is a visual representation of the rhythm of the language. The long, sloping horizontal lines and the sharp, energetic curves of the letters look like they are in motion. You watch the scribe's hand move with a fluid, confident grace. He doesn't hesitate. He knows exactly where the ink should go. It reminds you of the way the gardeners pruned the trees to be perfectly symmetrical. Call back to section 1. Everything in the Mughal world is about the mastery of form. Whether it is a tree, a piece of silk, or a sentence, it must be shaped with intention. You find this focus on perfection to be incredibly calming. It suggests a world where everything has a purpose and everything can be made beautiful if you just have enough patience and the right tools. The air is starting to turn a very pale, dusty gray, the first sign that the dawn is not far off. The lanterns are beginning to flicker, their oil running low. The poetry battle is winding down, the speakers taking longer pauses between their verses. You feel a sense of shared exhaustion that is actually quite pleasant. You have all survived the night together. You have navigated the walkways, the feast, the perfumes, and the poems. You are now a group of people bound together by a single night of intense, curated experience. You look at the person sitting next to you, a man you have never met before, and you both share a small, tired smile. No words are needed. You both know the rules, and you both played your part. The host signals the end of the session with a final, beautiful couplet that brings the themes of the night together: the garden, the water, the moon, and the heart. He speaks slowly, letting each word hang in the air for a moment before moving to the next. When he finishes, there is a long period of silence. No one wants to break the spell. The only sound is the steady, rhythmic splash of the water in the nearby fountain. You feel a profound sense of peace. The intellectual pressure has vanished, leaving only a quiet, luminous clarity. You are ready for the final part of the evening, the slow departure from this paradise. You think about that. Crocodile, dung sunscreen, the callback to the recurring joke, and how ridiculous it seems in the context of this high-minded poetry. It is a reminder that even the most refined cultures have their strange, earthy roots. The Mughals were people of the sword and the garden, the library and the kitchen. They embraced the whole spectrum of human experience, from the most physical to the most abstract. You find yourself appreciating this balance. You aren't just a brain sitting in a chair. You are a body wrapped in gold thread, a stomach full of saffron, and a nose full of roses. You are a complete being, experiencing a complete world. As you prepare to stand up, you take one last look at the shama. The flame is tiny now, a little point of orange light in the gray morning. It has done its job. It has guided you through the night, lighting the way for the words and the wit. You feel a wave of sleepiness that is so heavy it is almost physical. Your brain is tired, your body is tired, but your soul feels light. You have successfully navigated the peculiar rules of the Mughal poetry battle, and you have come out the other side with your dignity intact and your mind enriched. You are ready to close this chapter of the night and begin the slow, silent walk back to the real world. The transition to the final section of the evening will be the most difficult one yet, as you must leave the safety of the garden and return to the chaos of the city. But for now, you just enjoy the last few minutes of the quiet. You watch the scribe pack away his pens and his ink, his movements as careful and deliberate as they were at the beginning of the night. You feel a sense of kinship with him. You are both workers in the garden of beauty, each in your own way. You take a slow, deep breath of the early morning air, which is cool and smells of damp stone and fading incense. The night is over, but the memory of the verses will stay with you, a rhythmic echo in your mind as you drift towards sleep. The deep, velvet black of the night is finally beginning to dissolve into a soft, hazy charcoal. You look up and see that the stars are no longer sharp points of light. They are fading into a sky that is turning the color of a bruised plum. The cool air of the early morning is different from the cool air of the evening. It is thinner, sharper, and carries the scent of damp earth and the heavy, wet fragrance of the flowers that have spent all night opening their petals. You feel a profound sense of stillness settling over the garden. The poetry battles have ended, the laughter has died down, and even the music of the sitar has faded into a single, lingering note that seems to vibrate in the mist. You are still sitting on your velvet bolster, but your body feels heavy in a way that is almost pleasurable. It is the exhaustion of a person who has successfully navigated a world of impossible rules and has come out the other side with their dignity intact. You prepare to stand up, but you do so with extreme caution. Your legs have been folded for hours, and the blood is only just beginning to return to your feet. You feel the weight of your gold, embroidered jama, call back to section 2, pressing against your shoulders. The silk is slightly damp, now from the morning dew, making it feel even heavier and more substantial. You use the marble pillar for support, feeling the cold stone against your palm. As you rise, you hear the faint, musical clink of your pearl necklaces and the silver thread of your sash. It is a lonely sound in the quiet pavilion. You look around and see the other guests also beginning their slow, rhythmic departure. There is no rush to leave. To leave quickly would be just as rude as arriving late. You must fade away from the party with the same grace that you used to enter it. There is a mainstream historical fact that the ritual of departure in the Mughal court was just as regulated as the ritual of arrival. You must perform the Cornish one last time toward the empty seat of the emperor or the host. This is a specific type of bow where you place the palm of your right hand on your forehead and bend your body forward. It is a gesture of total submission and gratitude. You perform it slowly, feeling the stretch in your lower back and the weight of your turban. Call back to section 2, shifting slightly. You hold the position for a heartbeat longer than necessary, showing that you are in no hurry to leave the presence of such greatness. When you straighten up, you feel a sense of completion. The social contract of the night has been fulfilled. You have been a perfect guest in a perfect garden. As you begin the walk back toward the main gate, you notice that the servants are already beginning their work. They move like shadows in the gray light, gathering the empty silver bowls and folding the white calico day-stark one. Call back to section 4. You see a young boy carefully extinguishing the last of the lanterns, his movements silent and practiced. The garden is being put to sleep, just as you are preparing to do the same. You pass the water channels once more, and you notice that the water looks different in the dawn light. It is no longer a dark ribbon of silk. It is a clear, cold stream that reflects the pale gray of the sky. The fish, scale carvings on the Shadarvan as callback to section 3A's catch the first hint of light, making the water look like it is made of liquid silver. There is a quirky tidbit about the end of these parties that few people realize. Sometimes, a guest of particularly high favor would be presented with a kailat, or a robe of honor, upon their departure. This was a garment that the emperor or a high official had actually worn themselves, and receiving it was the ultimate sign of social success. You look at your own sleeves, which are still redolent of the rose attar and the sandalwood smoke. Call back to section 5, and you imagine the weight of an extra layer of imperial silk. You don't receive a robe tonight. but you feel as though you are carrying the spirit of the garden with you anyway. Your clothes are saturated with the memories of the night, the scent of the saffron rice, the sound of the poetry, and the feeling of the marble under your bare feet. Historians still argue whether these incredibly expensive and elaborate garden parties were a sustainable way to run an empire. Some suggest that the sheer cost of maintaining the Charbagh systems and providing for hundreds of guests contributed to the eventual financial strain on the Mughal state. Others argue that these events were essential for maintaining the theater of power, keeping the nobility loyal through a shared culture of luxury and refinement. As you walk past a pomegranate tree that is just beginning to emerge from the shadows, you aren't thinking about economics. You are thinking about how the light hits the dew on a single leaf. In this moment, the beauty of the garden seems like a perfectly valid reason for an entire empire to exist. If the point of civilization is to create a space where such a night is possible, then the Mughals certainly succeeded. You reach the large red sandstone bridge that crosses the central channels. Call back to Section 3. You stop in the middle and look back at the pavilion. It looks small now, a glowing island of white stone in a sea of gray and green. You think about the crocodile dung sunscreen, a callback to the recurring joker, and you smile to yourself. It seems like a lifetime ago that you were worrying about the smaller details of your appearance. Now, you are just a part of the landscape. You feel a deep connection to the symmetry of the garden. You are a point on a line, moving toward the exit, balanced by the silence and the space around you. Your imperial chill has reached its final form, a state of total, quiet acceptance of the world as it is. The walk toward the gate feels longer than the walk-in did. Your feet are cold now, and you can feel the individual textures of the marble and the sandstone. You notice that the jasmine flowers, call back to Section 5, are starting to close up as the first hint of the sun begins to warm the air. Their scent is fading, replaced by the fresh, sharp smell of the morning. You see a gardener kneeling by a flower bed, already beginning to pull at a weed that dared to grow during the night. He doesn't look up as you pass. To him, you are just another ghost of the night, a colorful figure fading into the mist. You realize that the garden is a machine that never stops. While you were eating and reciting poetry, people were working to make sure everything stayed perfect. Now that you are leaving, they are working to make sure it is ready for the next time. You reach the massive wooden gate. The brass studs are cold to the touch. The gatekeeper, a tall man in a simple linen tunic, gives you a respectful nod as he pulls the heavy door open, just enough for you to slip through. The sound of the wood scraping against the stone is the first, real, world sound you have heard in hours. It is loud and harsh compared to the whispers of the garden. You step over the high threshold and back onto the dusty street outside the palace walls. The transition is jarring. The air here is drier, and the sounds of the city are starting to wake up. You hear the distant braying of a donkey and the clatter of a wooden cart. The dream of the Charbagh is officially over. However, as you walk toward your waiting carriage, you realize that you aren't the same person who entered those gates. You carry the rhythm of the water in your head and the scent of the roses on your skin. You move with a certain slow grace that you didn't have before. You have learned how to sit, how to eat, how to speak, and how to be still. The peculiar rules of the Mughal garden party weren't just about showing off. They were a way of training the soul to appreciate the finer points of existence. You feel a sense of profound calm that the noise of the city cannot touch. You are a creature of the moonlit garden, temporarily living in the world of the sun. You climb into the carriage and settle onto the cushions. They aren't as soft as the velvet bolsters of the pavilion, but they are comfortable enough. As the carriage begins to move, you lean your head back and close your eyes. You can still feel the weight of the pearls, call back to section 2, around your neck, a physical reminder of the night's luxury. You think about the saffron-stained rice, and the silver foils call back to section 4, and you can almost still taste the sweetness of the rosewater. The world is starting to get louder, but you don't mind. You have a secret garden inside your mind now, a place of perfect symmetry and steady water, where the poetry never ends and the sun never quite rises. You imagine the garden as it looks right now, with the sun just hitting the tops of the cypress trees. The white marble will start to glow with a warm, golden light, and the water in the channels will turn from silver to blue. The servants will finish their cleaning and disappear behind the walls, leaving the garden empty and perfect once more. It is a comforting thought. Even when you aren't there, the paradise exists. It is a constant, a fixed point of beauty in a changing world. You let out a long, slow sigh, and you feel the last of the night's tension leave your body. You are ready to go home. You are ready to sleep. The carriage jolts slightly as it hits a rut in the road, but you don't open your eyes. You are focused on the internal rhythm of your own breathing. You find yourself matching it to the memory of the bubbling fountain, that low, steady pulse that kept time for the entire party. You realize that the most important, peculiar rule of the night was the simplest one: to be present in the moment, to notice the light, the scent, and the sound of a world that was built just for you. You have done that. You have been a witness to the beauty of the empire, and that is a gift that no one can take away. As you drift closer to the edge of sleep, the details of the night begin to blur together. The gold thread, the three-finger rule, the crocodile, dung, joke, and the Persian verses all become a single, warm hum in the back of your mind. You feel incredibly safe and incredibly tired. The journey is over, and the destination is the deep, dreamless sleep of a person who has spent a night in heaven. You are no longer an aristocrat or a guest. You are just a traveler returning from a very long, very beautiful trip. The world outside the carriage continues to wake up, but for you, the night is just beginning its final, most peaceful act. The scent of the rose attar is still there, faint but persistent. It is like a promise that the garden is still with you. You take one last, deep breath, feeling the cool air of the morning turn into the warm air of your own sleep. You are at peace. The imperial chill has finally brought you to the place you were meant to be all along. You are back in your own life, but you are carrying the light of the Mughal moon with you. The silence of the garden has become your own silence. The symmetry of the trees has become your own balance. You are ready to let go. The world is very quiet now, isn't it? The garden has faded into a soft memory, and the sounds of the night have become a gentle lullaby. You can feel the weight of your own blankets, as soft and heavy as the silk robes you wore through the moonlit paths. Your breathing has slowed to a deep, rhythmic pulse, matching the steady flow of the water in those distant marble channels. There is no rush anymore. There are no more poems to remember, no more bows to perform, and no more social rules to follow. You have reached the end of the journey, and the gate is open for you to step into the world of dreams. Think of the way the lanterns flickered out one by one, leaving only the soft, grey light of the dawn. That is how your thoughts are fading now, one by one, gently and naturally. You are safe, you are warm, and the history of the world is just a quiet whisper in your ear, telling you that everything is exactly as it should be. The symmetry is perfect. The water is still. The stars have tucked themselves away behind the clouds, and the earth is settled and quiet. You are part of that quiet now. Let your shoulders sink a little deeper into the mattress. Let your hands relax, releasing the last bits of the day's tension. You are drifting on a calm, dark river, flowing slowly toward a place of total rest. There is nothing left for you to do but close your eyes and let the darkness be your garden. The air is cool, the bed is soft, and the night is yours. Sleep is coming for you like a friend, draped in silk and smelling of ancient roses. Let it wrap you in its heavy, golden folds.